She never thought a quiet morning at her father's fishing dock would turn into a nightmare. The sound of motorcycle engines shattered the peace at Eagles Point Harbor, and in just moments, Hannah Collins would find herself surrounded by the most notorious gang in 3 states. The Steel Vipers weren't known for their mercy, and as their leader circled her, like a predator, she could feel her heart pounding against her chest. But what these dangerous men didn't know, what nobody in town knew, was that her quiet, unassuming father was about to teach them the most brutal lesson of their lives. They thought Daniel Collins was just another small-town fisherman. They saw his weathered hands, his patient smile, his humble demeanor. They assumed he was weak, someone they could push around, someone whose daughter they could terrorize. They were about to learn how wrong they were in the next few minutes. The Steel Vipers would discover that they hadn't just picked on any fisherman's daughter. They had threatened a Navy SEAL's little girl, and some mistakes you only make once. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The morning mist clings to the surface of the lake at Eagles Point Harbor, where the gentle lapping of waves against wooden docks creates a symphony of serenity. Hannah Collins stands at the edge of her father's weathered fishing pier, her breath visible in the crisp morning air. At 23, she moves with the confidence of someone who has spent their entire life on these docks, checking equipment and preparing for another day of charter fishing tours. The calm morning shatters as the distant rumble of motorcycles echoes across the water. Hannah's hand pauses on the rope. She's quailing, her eyes drawn to the road leading into the marina. The sound grows louder, more menacing with each passing second. The Steel Vipers appear like dark specters through the morning haze, their chrome bikes gleaming under the rising sun. 5 riders, their leather cuts adorned with patches that speak of territory and violence, pull into the marina's gravel parking lot. Their leader, Drake Thompson, kills his engine first, the sudden silence more threatening than the roar that preceded it. Hannah's fingers tighten around the rope, her knuckles white with tension. She's heard stories about the Steel Vipers, whispered warnings in local diners about their reputation for violence and intimidation, but they've never come to Eagles Point Harbor before. Not until today. Drake dismounts his bike with practiced ease, his boots crunching on the gravel. Well, what do we have here? His voice carries across the marina, tripping with mock curiosity. Looks like someone's little girl is playing with boats. Hannah continues her work, trying to project a calm. She doesn't feel the methodical motion of coiling the rope gives her something to focus on besides the approaching footsteps. This is a private charter business, she says, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. Unless you have a booking, I'll need to ask you to leave. The biker laughed, the sound echoing across the empty marina. Drake steps closer, deliberately invading her space. His right-hand man, Marcus, flanks him while the others spread out, creating a loose circle around Hannah. A booking. Drake's lips curl into a smirk. Sweetheart, the Steel Vipers don't need bookings. We go where we want, when we want. Inside the marina office, Mike Henderson watches through the window, his weathered face creased with concern. His hand reaches for the phone, fingers trembling slightly as he dials a number he knows by heart. Out on the lake, Daniel Collins is showing a young family the finer points of bass fishing. When his phone buzzes in his pocket, something in Mike's voice makes him reel in his line immediately. Everything okay at the dock, Mike? Dan, you better get back here. The Steel Vipers just rolled in, and they're circling Hannah like sharks. Daniel's jaw tightens, but his voice remains calm. I'll be right there. He turns to his clients with an apologetic smile. Folks, we're going to have to cut this morning's lesson short. Family emergency. Back at the dock, Drake has his move even closer to Hannah. He reaches out, running a finger along the coiled rope in her hands. Nice knots your daddy teach you. That must be real proud having his little girl carry on the family business. Hannah steps back, her spine straight. I said you need to leave. Marcus laughs, the sound sharp and cruel. She's got spirit, Drake. I like that. Makes it more fun when they fight back a little. Another biker adds, moving to block Hannah's path to the marina office. Drake's smile fades slightly. You know, We've been thinking about expanding our territory. Eagles Point Harbor seems like a nice little spot, quiet, peaceful. He looks around the marina with exaggerated interest. Perfect place for a new clubhouse, don't you think? Hannah's heart races, but she keeps her voice level. This is private property. You're trespassing. Drake throws his head back and laughs. Boys, you hear that little girl thinks she owns these docks. His expression darkens. Let me explain something to you, sweetheart. Everything here, it belongs to whoever's strong enough to take it. He reaches for the rope in Hannah's hands, but she holds firm. For a moment they're locked in a silent battle of wills, neither willing to let go. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Hannah warns, though her voice trembles slightly. Drake's grip tightens. And why is that your daddy going to come save you? His voice drops to a menacing whisper. Where is daddy anyway? Out playing fisherman while his little girl faces the big bad world alone. The other bikers close in, their leather cuts creaking as they move. The morning sun catches on patches that read Steel Vipers MC and No Mercy stitched into worn leather. Maybe we should stick around, Marcus suggests, his eyes never leaving Hannah. Show her how real men run a business. Hannah's mind races. Her father is out on the lake, probably already heading back thanks to Mike's call, but she doesn't know how long it will take him to return. She needs to buy time, keep the situation from escalating. The sheriff makes regular patrols through here, she says, trying to inject confidence into her voice. He'll be by any minute. Drake's smile widens. No, he won't. See, we passed your local law enforcement about 10 my back. Looked like he was dealing with a nasty accident on the highway, could be there for hours. He releases the rope, suddenly causing Hannah to stumble back. We got all the time in the world. The bikers laugh again, but this time there's something darker in the sound. Hannah glances toward the marina office, where she can see Mike on the phone, his face pale with concern. Last chance, Hannah says, straightening her shoulders. Leave now, or what? Drake steps even closer, towering over her. You going to make us? You and what? Army little girl. The rumble of an approaching boat engine cuts through the tension. Hannah feels a flutter of relief in her chest, knowing that sound anywhere. Her father's charter boat is returning to the dock. Drake turns his head slightly at the sound, but doesn't back away. It looks like daddy's coming home. Good. Maybe he can teach us all about fishing. His voice drips with sarcasm. Always wanted to learn from a real professional. The morning sun breaks through the mist as Daniel Collins's boat approaches the dock. From where she stands, Hannah can see her father's familiar figure at the helm, his movements calm and deliberate as he guides the vessel home. What the Steel Vipers don't see, what they couldn't possibly know, is the way Daniel's eyes scan the situation, taking in every detail with the precision of a man who has spent years in combat. They don't notice how he's already noting their positions, analyzing angles, identifying threats. They see what they want to see, a simple fisherman returning to port, unaware that they're about to learn the cost of threatening a Navy SEAL's daughter. The boat's engine cuts off, leaving an expectant silence hanging over the marina. Drake turns back to Hannah, his smile cruel and confident. Now the real fun begins. Daniel Collins guides his boat to the dock with practiced ease, his movements deliberate and controlled. Nothing in his weathered face betrays the calculations running through his mind as he takes in the scene before him. The 5 bikers have created a loose semicircle around Hannah, their leather cuts catching the morning sun, patches proclaiming their allegiance to the Steel Vipers MC. He ties off the boat with swift, efficient motions, each movement precise. His clients, the young family he'd been teaching to fish, huddled nervously at the stern, sensing the tension in the air. Head straight to your car, Daniel tells them quietly, his voice calm but brooking no argument. Don't look back, don't engage. The family hurries past the bikers, the father pulling his children close as they make their way to the parking lot. Drake watches them go with obvious amusement, then turns his attention to Daniel. Well, if it isn't Daddy, dearest, Drake calls out, his voice carrying across the dock just in time for the party. Daniel steps onto the dock, his boots making solid contact with the wooden planks. He moves unhurriedly, each step measured and deliberate. To the bikers, he looks like any other middle-aged fisherman, weathered jeans, faded flannel shirt, years of sun etched into his face. They don't notice how he's already mapped out every possible angle of approach. Every potential weapon within reach. Hannah, Daniel says, his voice steady. Everything okay here? Before Hannah can answer, Drake cuts in. Oh, we've been taking good care of your little girl, teaching her all about respect and how things work in the real world. Daniel continues his measured approach, stopping a precise distance from the group. Is that right? His tone remains conversational, but there's something in his eyes that makes Marcus shift. Uneasily, Dad, Hannah starts, but Drake talks over her again. You know, we were just discussing business opportunities, Drake says, spreading his arms wide. This marina, it's got potential, lots of potential. Maybe it's time for some new management. Daniel's expression doesn't change, but something in the air shifts. I see, and you'd be the new management. Drake smile. Win, smart man. See, that's how things work. Strong take what they want, weak learn to live with it, or don't live with it, their choice. That's an interesting philosophy, Daniel replies, his voice still calm. Got a lot of experience with that. Do you? One of the bikers, a hulking man with a patch reading tank, steps forward. You mocking us, old man? No, Daniel says, simply just having a conversation, trying to understand your position. He turns his attention back to Drake. So what exactly are you proposing here? Drake laughs. But there's an edge to it now. Something about the old fisherman's calmness is starting to get under his skin. Proposing? I ain't proposing anything. I'm telling you how it's going to be. This marina, it's Steel Viper territory. Now you want to keep running your little fishing tours. You pay us protection. Want to keep your pretty daughter safe. You pay us more. Hannah starts to protest, but Daniel raises his hand slightly, a gesture so subtle the bikers don't even notice it, but Hannah falls silent immediately, recognizing the signal from years of working alongside her father. Protection. Daniel repeats thoughtfully. From what? From us, Marcus sneers, stepping closer to Hannah. Would be a shame if something happened to your boats or your girl. Daniel's eyes track Marcus's movement, noting the way the biker's hand rests near his belt, where the outline of a knife is visible beneath his cut. The other bikers are spreading out slightly, unconsciously moving into attack positions. You're threatening my daughter, Daniel says, his voice still conversational. It's not a question. Threatening? Drake affects an innocent expression. No, just explaining the facts of life. Strong survive, weak well. They learn their place. Daniel nods slowly. I understand. And you consider yourselves strong? Something in his tone makes Drake pause, but the biker leader covers it with a laugh. Look around, old man. 5 of us, one of you. Your daughter's pretty, but she doesn't count. Math ain't that hard, is it? Numbers can be deceiving, Daniel replies mildly. Tank takes another step forward, cracking his knuckles. Nothing deceiving about a beating old-timer, Dad, Hannah says, again, concern evident in her voice. She's seen her father calm before, but this is different. This is the kind of calm that comes before a storm. It's okay, Hannah, Daniel assures her, his eyes never leaving Drake. These gentlemen are about to learn something important about strength. Drake's amusement begins to fade, replaced by irritation. The old man's continued calm is starting to feel like disrespect. Only thing getting learned here is you pop's last chance. You want to do this the easy way, or we giving your daughter a front row seat to watch her daddy get broken. Daniel takes a single step forward. The movement is so smooth, so controlled, that Drake unconsciously takes a half step back before catching himself. Let me be clear, Daniel says, his voice dropping slightly. You came to my marina, you threatened my daughter. You're talking about taking what isn't yours. That tells me you don't understand the first thing about real strength. That right? Drake's hand moves to his back, where a heavy chain is coiled at his belt. Why don't you educate us? Then Daniel's eyes track the movement, but his expression remains unchanged. You sure that's what you want? Education can be expensive. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The tension in the air thickens. Even the morning birds have fallen silent, as if nature itself is holding its breath. Hannah watches her father, seeing subtle changes in his posture that the bikers missed. The slight shift in his weight, the way his hands hang loose but ready at his sides. You got a smart mouth for an old man, Drake snarls, his patience finally snapping. Maybe we start by shutting it permanently. He nods to Tank and Marcus, who begin to move forward. Daniel doesn't back away, doesn't raise his hands, doesn't show any sign of fear. He simply stands there waiting. Last chance, Daniel says quietly, walk away now. And we forget this happened. Drake pulls the chain from his belt, letting it dangle. Oh, we're way past walking away. Old man, way past. That the morning sun breaks through the clouds, casting harsh shadows across the dock. In that moment, as the bikers tense for action, Hannah sees something change in her father's eyes. The calm is still there, but now there's something else behind it, something that speaks of battles fought, and won in places far from this peaceful marina. The steel vipers are about to learn why some waters run deep, and why the quietest predators are often the most dangerous. Tank moves first, his mass frame charging toward Daniel with the confidence of someone who's never lost a fight. His fist cuts through the morning air, aimed at the older man's jaw, but connects with nothing but miss. Daniel's movement is so subtle, so efficient, that it takes Tank a full second to realize he's missed. The hell, Tank mutters, stumbling slightly as his momentum carries him forward. Drake watches his chain hanging loose in his grip as his enforcer regains his balance. Something doesn't feel right. The old fisherman shouldn't have been able to move that fast. Having trouble, Daniel asks quietly, still standing in the same relaxed pose, as if nothing had happened. Tank snarls and launches another attack, this time throwing a combination of punches that would have laid out any normal man, but Daniel isn't there for any of them, each movement taking him just inches out of harm's way with an economy of motion that speaks of years of training. Stand still, old man. Tank's frustration boils over as he swings wildly. Why? Daniel's voice remains calm. You seem to be doing fine on your own. Marcus steps forward, pulling his knife. The blade catches the morning sun as he flicks it open. Let's see you dance around this. Pops. Hannah takes a step forward, but Daniel's voice stops her. Stay where you are, honey, everything's under control. Drake laughs, but there's an edge of uncertainty in it. Now control, you're outnumbered, old-timer. And now you've got steel to deal with. Numbers, Daniel says softly, don't mean much if you don't know how to use them. Marcus lunges with the knife, while Tank comes in from the other side. It should have been a perfect trap. Instead, Daniel steps between them with fluid grace, and suddenly Tank is sprawled on the dock, his own momentum used against him, while Marcus stumbles back, his knee hand twisted at an awkward angle. What? The Marcus starts, but his words cut off in a gasp as Daniel applies just a touch more pressure to his wrist. Language. Daniel chides gently. My daughter's present. The knife clatters to the dock, and Daniel releases Marcus with a small push that sends him staggering back into Drake. The gang leader has to step quickly to avoid being knocked over, his chain swinging wildly. Who are you? Drake demands, his earlier confidence cracking slightly. Just a fisherman, Daniel replies mildly. Like I said, numbers can be deceiving. The other two bikers, who had been hanging back, now move forward uncertainly. They've never seen anyone handle Tank and Marcus so easily, especially not some weather-beaten old fisherman boss. One of them says hesitantly, something ain't right here. Drake's face darkens with rage. Shut up, he's just one old man. Take him. They rush forward together, but Daniel moves like water flowing between their attacks. One biker throws a punch that Daniel guides past him, letting the momentum carry his attacker straight into his companion. They collide with a grunt, stumbling over each other. Hannah watches from the sidelines, her heart racing, but her fear now mixed with a different emotion, pride. She's never seen her father fight before, never known this side of him existed, yet here he is handling 5 dangerous men with the same calm precision he uses to navigate storm-tossed waters. Dad, she calls out as Tank struggles to his feet again. Behind you. But Daniel is already moving, stepping aside as Tank's wild charge carries him straight into one of the dock's wooden posts. The solid thunk of skull meeting wood echoes across the marina, and Tank drops like a stone. Anyone else? Daniel asks, still in that same conversational tone. Drake's knuckles whiten around his chain. What kind of fisherman are you? The kind who's giving you one last chance to leave. Daniel replies, take your friend there. He nods at Tank's unconscious form. And go before this gets serious. Drake's laugh has an edge of hysteria to it. Now, you think this is a game? No, Daniel says, his voice Dropping slightly, I think this is you making a series of increasingly poor decisions. Would you like to make another one? Marcus has regained his feet, rubbing his wrist and glaring at Daniel. Boss, this guy, he's not normal. Shut up, Drake snaps. All of you take him down now. The remaining conscious bikers look at each other uncertainly. Their earlier confidence has evaporated in the face of Daniel's inexplicable skill. Even Drake seems less sure his chain now held defensively rather than as a weapon. I can do this all day, Daniel tells them calmly, but I got charters booked this afternoon, and I'd hate to disappoint my clients. You think this is over? Drake demands, though he takes a small step back. You think you can embarrass the Steel Vikers and just walk away? I think, Daniel replies, that you came looking for easy prey and found something else entirely. The question is, are you smart enough to learn from the experience? Drake's face contorts with rage. With a roar, he swings the chain in a deadly arc toward Daniel's head. The metal whistles through the air, and then Danny isn't there anymore. The chain's momentum carries Drake off balance, and suddenly he's falling, the world spinning around him as Daniel uses his own weight and motion against him. Drake hits the dock hard, the chain clattering away across the wooden planks. He looks up to find Daniel standing over him, still with that same calm expression. Now, Daniel says quietly, about that education you wanted. The morning sun has risen fully now, burning away the last of the mist in its clear light. The Steel Viper's fearsome reputation seems to be evaporating just as quickly, leaving them looking like what they really are, bullies who finally picked the wrong target. And Daniel Collins, the simple fisherman they'd so badly underestimated, is about to teach them exactly why that was a mistake. Drake struggles to his feet, his leather cut dusty from the fall, his earlier arrogance replaced by something approaching genuine fear. The casual ease with which Daniel had handled his attacks has shaken him more than he wants to admit. You've had training, Drake accuses, backing away slightly. Military. Daniel's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. Does it matter, boss? Marcus calls out, still nursing his twisted wrist. I've seen moves like that before. My cousin was force recon. This ain't just some random training. Hannah watches the realization spread across the biker faces. She's known about her father's past her whole life, but seeing him in action is different from hearing the stories. The calm, patient man who taught her to tie fishing knots and read weather patterns is still there, but now she's seeing the warrior beneath the surface. Navy SEAL, Daniel says quietly, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent dock. 15 years retired now. But some things you don't forget. Drake's face goes pale. SEAL, which explains why you're all still conscious. Daniel continues conversationally, if I wanted you hurt, you'd be hurt. Instead, I'm trying to teach you something about respect. One of the bikers, the youngest of the group, starts edging toward his motorcycle. Boss, maybe we should. Nobody moves. Drake snaps, though his voice shakes slightly. We're the Steel Vipers. We don't back down. Daniel sigh softly. Pride's going to get you killed one day. Today, it's just going to get you embarrassed. Tank groans from his position on the dock, finally regaining consciousness. He pushes himself to his knees, shaking his head to clear it. What happened? Your boss is about to make another mistake. Daniel tells him calmly, you might want to stay down for this one. Drake's hand moves to his back, and Hannah sees the glint of metal. Dad, but Daniel has already moved the gun Drake was reaching for. Never clears his waistband before Daniel closes the distance between them. His movements are precise, economical, trained by years of combat experience. Drake gasps as his arm is locked behind him, the gun falling harmlessly to the dock. That, Daniel says, his voice hardening, for the first time was your biggest mistake yet. With a twist and a sweep of his leg, Daniel sends Drake sprawling again. The gun skitters across the dock, stopping at Hannah's feet. She picks it up carefully, holding it like it might bite her. 15 years is a SEAL. Daniel continues, looking down at Drake. You know what that means? It means I've forgotten more about combat than you'll ever know. It means I faced threats that would make you wet yourself, and it means that threatening my daughter was the dumbest thing you've ever done. Marcus takes a halting step forward. We didn't know. That's the point. Daniel cuts him off. You never know. You ride into town, throw your weight around, think you're the biggest predator in the water, But there's always something deeper in the dark, something that's seen real combat, faced real enemies. He turns to address all of them. Now his voice carrying the weight of command. I've fought in places you've never heard of, against enemies you couldn't imagine. You think you're tough because you can intimidate fishermen and shopkeepers. Try facing down actual terrorists. Try swimming through hostile waters with bullets tracking your movement. The bikers stand frozen, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. Even Drake remains on the ground, no longer trying to get up. But you know what the real difference is between you and me, Daniel continues. I don't need to prove anything. I don't need to strut around intimidating people to feel strong. Real strength is knowing when not to fight. Pa watches her father, seeing him in a new light. All of these years she'd known about his service, but she'd never truly understood what it meant. Now, watching him handle 5 dangerous men with calculated precision, she's beginning to grasp the depth of his experience. So here's what's going to happen, Daniel says, his voice level, but carrying an unmistakable note of authority. You're going to get on your bikes, you're going to ride out of Eagles Point Harbor, and you're going to remember this moment every time you think about bothering peaceful people. Drake manages to push himself to his knees, his face a mask of conflicting emotions, fear, anger, humiliation. You think this is over, that depends on you. Daniel replies, I can keep demonstrating why this is a bad idea, or you can be smart and walk away, your choice. But I should warn you, I've got all day, and so far, I haven't even started trying. Tank, still groggy from his encounter with the dock post, staggers to his feet. Boss, he's right. We should go. Shut up, Drake snarls, but his voice lacks conviction. Now, no, you shut up, Marcus cuts in, surprising everyone. We came here looking for easy money, not a fight with a Dan Seal. I'm out. The younger bikers nod in agreement, already backing toward their motorcycles. Only Drake remains defiant. Though he makes no move to get up from his knees, Daniel watches them with the patience of a man who has waited out long sieges. Pride's a funny thing, he says softly. Right now, it's telling you to keep fighting, but wisdom's telling you to cut your losses. The morning sun has climbed higher, burning away the last of the mist. In its clear light, the Steel Viper fearsome reputation seems to be dissolving just as quickly, leaving them looking like what they really are, bullies who finally met someone they can't intimidate. And Daniel Collins, the quiet fisherman they'd so badly underestimated, isn't finished teaching them about real strength yet. Drake remains on his knees, his world crumbling around him as his gang begins to splinter. Marcus has already started walking toward his bike, followed by the younger members. Only Tank remains beside his leader, though uncertainty shows clearly on his face. You walk away from this, Drake calls to his retreating men. You're out, you hear me, out for good. Daniel's voice cuts through the tension. Sounds like a promotion to me. Marcus pauses, turning back. What's that supposed to mean? Means you've got a choice, Daniel replies calmly. Stay with someone who'd get you killed for his pride, or walk away and be your own man. Some leaders protect their people, others use them as shields. Drake struggles to his feet, his face red with rage and humiliation. You don't know anything. Think about leadership. 3 tours as team leader in active combat zones. Daniel says quietly, I know more than you think. No, what else? I know a real leader doesn't sacrifice his people for his ego. Hannah watches the younger bikers exchange glances. She can see the impact of her father's words, the way they're hitting home with men who've probably never questioned their choices before. They're just afraid. Drake spits out, afraid of one old man. No, Daniel corrects him. They're showing intelligence, something you should try. He turns to address the other bikers directly. You all have training, don't you? Military. Marcus nods slowly. Most of us got out, couldn't find our way back to civilian life. The club, it gave us something: structure, purpose, brotherhood. Daniel's voice carries understanding now. But this isn't brotherhood. This is bullying, and you're better than that. Tank steps forward, his massive frame somehow smaller now. I was Army 2 tours in Afghanistan, got out, felt lost, thought the club would give me back what I was missing, and did it. No, Tank admits quietly, just made me something I never wanted to be. Drake's face contorts with fury. Traitors, all of you, they're not betraying you. Daniel tells him they're remembering who they really are: soldiers, warriors, men who once stood for something more than terrorizing small towns, Hannah sees tears in Tank's eyes. Now something breaking through his tough exterior, the other bikers have stopped. Moving toward their bikes, caught in the gravity of the moment. You know what I see when I look at you, Daniel continues. I see men who served their country, who knew real brotherhood, real purpose, and somewhere along the way you lost it, started following someone who never understood what that really meant. Marcus turns back fully, now his expression troubled. We just after getting out, nothing felt right, nothing felt real. I know, Daniel says softly. Believe me, I know. When I first got out, I was lost too. Took me a long time to find my way back, to understand that the strength we learned in service isn't for dominating others, it's for protecting them. Drake tries to move toward his guns, still in Hannah's hands, but Daniel's sharp glance freezes him in place. Don't. Daniel warns quietly, you've made enough mistakes today. Hannah steps forward, car carefully keeping the gun pointed at the ground. Dad, what should I do with this unloaded? Daniel instructs, just like I taught you. She does so with practiced ease, drawing surprised looks from the bikers. The magazine drops into her palm, and she checks the chamber with professional precision. You taught your daughter to handle weapons? Marcus asks. I taught her to respect them, Daniel corrects. There's a difference, just like there's a difference between being strong and being a bully. The morning has grown warmer, the sun now high enough to cast shorter shadows across the dock. In its bright light, the changes in the bikers' faces are clear to see. Shame, recognition, the slow dawn of understanding. It's not too late, Daniel tells them. Any of you, the men you were before, the soldiers, the warriors, the protectors, they're still in there. You just forgot them for a while. Tank wipes his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. What are we supposed to do? Where are we supposed to go? Start by remembering who you are. Daniel says there are programs for veterans, people who understand what you're going through, people who can help you find your way back. Drake launches himself forward suddenly, but Daniel Sid steps smoothly, letting the gang leader momentum carry him past. In one fluid motion, he takes Drake's legs out from under him, pinning him face down on the dock. Still having learned Daniel's size, some lessons take longer than others. I suppose the other bikers make no move to help their leader. Instead, they watch with a mixture of embarrassment and relief, as if witnessing the end of something that should have ended long ago. Your choice wasn't just about today, Daniel tells the pinned man quietly. It was about every day you led these men down the wrong path, every time you made them less than what they could be. In the distance, police sirens begin to wail. Mike Henderson must have called them. After all, Hannah sees the younger bikers tense, ready to flee, but her father's voice stops them. Stay, he commands, and the authority in his voice makes them freeze. Face this, start making better choices. It's what soldiers do. The morning wind carries the scent of lake water and pine, a reminder of the peace that existed before the steel vipers arrived. But now, as the sirens grow closer, something else hangs in the air, the possibility of redemption, of finding a better path. And for most of the men standing on that dock, it feels like the first real thing they felt in years. Two police cruisers pull into the marina parking lot, lights flashing against the morning sun. Sheriff Wilson steps out first, his hand resting cautiously on his holster behind him. Deputy Martins emerges from the second vehicle, taking in the scene with obvious surprise. Daniel maintains his hold on Drake, but addresses the approaching officers calmly. Morning, Tom, situation's under control. Sheriff Wilson takes in the scattered bikers, Tank's bruised face and Marcus' swollen wrist. His eyebrows rise slightly. Looks like we missed quite a party, Dan. Just a misunderstanding about marina management, Daniel replies mildly. These gentlemen were confused about who owns the property. Drake struggles under Daniel's hold. This is assault. I want him arrested. Funny, Sheriff Wilson draws Mike Henderson's call, mentioned something about armed suspects threatening his tenants, said something about a gun being pulled too. Hannah steps forward, carefully holding out the unloaded weapon and magazine separately. Here, Sheriff, this is what he tried to use on my father. Deputy Martinez moves to secure the weapon, his trained eyes noting the professional way Hannah handles it. You know your way around firearms, miss. My father taught me, she says simply, about respect, responsibility, and when not to use them. The sheriff looks at the remaining bikers who haven't moved toward their motorcycles despite the obvious Temptation to flee steel vipers, he notes, reading their cuts. You boys are a long way from your usual territory. Marcus steps forward, his millet AR bearing showing through despite his biker appearance. Sir, we'd like to surrender ourselves voluntarily. Drake's head snaps. Up what you can't shut up. Drake Tank rumbles, moving to stand beside Marcus. We're done following you into the gutter. Sheriff Wilson studies the two men. Thoughtfully. Surrender? That's not usually how these situations go down. No. Sir, Marcus agrees, but we've had some sense knocked into us, figuratively speaking, he adds, glancing at Daniel. Daniel releases his hold on Drake, stepping back smoothly as Deputy Martinez moves in with handcuffs. These men are veterans, Tom. They lost their way for a bit, but I think they're ready to find it again. The sheriff's expression softens slightly. His own service in the Gulf War makes him particularly understanding of veteran struggles. His that right. Tank straightens his spine unconsciously into a military stance. Yes, sir. Straightens his spine unconsciously into a military stance. Yes, sir. Army 10th Mountain Division. Lost my way after getting out, but well, Mr. Collins helped us remember some important things. Navy SEAL Sheriff Wilson says, nodding toward Daniel. He has a way of making lessons stick. The younger bikers, following their comrades' lead, step forward to surrender themselves. Only Drake continues to resist, cursing and struggling as Deputy Martinez secures the cuffs. You're all dead. Drake spits. The club will hear about this. The club, Marcus interrupts firmly, is about to undergo some changes in leadership. Assuming any of us stay with it at all. Daniel watches the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. Sheriff, these men might benefit from that veterans program you mentioned last month, the one running out of Portland. Thinking the same thing, Sheriff Wilson agrees, assuming they're serious about making changes. We are tanks. As quietly, sir, he struggles with the words, years of pent-up emotion trying to break free. Take it easy, soldier, Daniel tells him gently, one step at a time. Hannah moves to stand beside her father, watching as Deputy Martinez leads a still struggling Drake to the patrol. Our dad, you knew, didn't you, about them being veterans? Suspected. Daniel corrects, saw it in their movements, their reactions. Men like that. They're not lost because they're bad. They're lost because they're searching for something they had before. Sheriff Wilson directs the other bikers to sit on a nearby bench while he makes some calls. None of them make any attempt to flee their postures, reflecting their military backgrounds. Now that the biker bravado has fallen away, Mr. Collins, Marcus calls out, I thank you not for the fighting, but for, he gestures vaguely, for seeing us. Really seeing us? Daniel nods in acknowledgement. Your soldiers you just forgot for a while. Now do you get to remember? The morning has grown warmer. The lake's surface glittering with sunlight. The chaos of earlier has been replaced by a different kind of tension. The tension of men facing their choices, their futures, their potential for redemption. What happens now? Hannah asks quietly. Now, Daniel replies, these men get a chance to find their way back. Real strength isn't in defeating an enemy, honey, it's in helping them become something better. Sheriff Wilson returns, tucking his phone away. Got good news. Veterans program has space. Judge Johnson's willing to consider alternative sentencing given the circumstances and their service records. He looks at the bikers, assuming you're all willing to do the work. Tank and Marcus exchange glances with their younger companions. The moment stretches heavy with possibility. Yes, sir, they reply in unison, the response automatic, ingrained from years of service. As the morning continues to unfold, Hannah watches the transformation taking place on her family's dock. The steel viper, who arrived full of menace and bravado, are gone, replaced by men who might, with time and help, find their way back to who they once were. And her father, the quiet fisherman who had once again proven that true strength lies not in violence, but in wisdom, stands watching over it all with the patient eyes of a man who understands that some victories don't require any battles at all. The real fight, the one for redemption, is only just beginning. The fluorescent lights of Eagles Point Harbor Police Station cast harsh shadows across tired faces. Daniel sits beside Hannah in the waiting area while Sheriff Wilson processes the bikers through the glass partition. They can see Tank and Marcus sitting quietly, their leather cuts looking oddly out of place under the stark lighting. Mr. Collins, Deputy Martinez, approaches with a clipboard. We'll need Your statement before Daniel can respond, shouting erupts from the holding cells. Drake's voice carries through the station, full of venom. In desperation, you think this changes. Anything, you're dead, Collins, your daughter's dead, the club, well, that's enough. Sheriff Wilson's command cuts through the air, even through the walls. His authority is clear. Daniel remains seated, his posture relaxed despite the threats. Hannah watches his face, searching for any sign of concern, but finds only calm certainty. He doesn't give up. Does he? She asks quietly. Men like that, Daniel replies. They mistake volume for strength. The louder they shout, the more they're drowning. Deputy Martinez shifts uncomfortably. Sir, given the nature of his threats, we should discuss protective measures. No need, Daniel interrupts gently. Drake's already lost everything. He values his power, his reputation, his control over the others. Those threats, they're just empty air through the glass. They can see Marcus talking quiet with Sheriff Wilson. His posture has changed completely. Gone is the swagger of a biker enforcer, replaced by the respectful bearing of a veteran speaking to authority. Your father's right. Tank's deep voice surprises them. He stands in the doorway, accompanied by another deputy. Dre's finished the club, was already tired of his leadership. He shakes his head. This is the end for him. Daniel studies the big man thoughtfully. And for you, Tank's shoulders slump slightly. Judge Johnson's offering us a deal, veterans program instead of jail time, counseling, job training, the whole package. He pauses, struggling with his next words. Would you be willing to put in a good word? Tell them we're serious about changing. Hannah watches her father carefully. This is the same man who hours ago had tried to intimidate her on the dock, but there's something different in his eyes now, a vulnerability, a hope that wasn't there before. Already did. Daniel tells him, called the program director. While they were processing you, old SEAL buddy of mine runs it. He's expecting you. Tank's eyes widen. You do that for us after what we did? What you did was wrong. Daniel acknowledges, but what you're doing now, choosing to change, that takes more courage than any fight. The big man blinks rapidly, turning away to hide sudden moisture in his eyes. Sheriff Wilson appears beside him, a stack of papers in hand. Everything set. The sheriff announces, Judge Johnson signed off on the deal. You boys leave for Portland tomorrow morning. He looks at Tank. Seriously, don't make me regret going to bat for you. No, sir. Tank responds automatically, militarying, returning. We won't let you down. Through the glass, they can see Marcus and the younger bikers receiving similar news. Their reactions are a mix of relief, disbelief, and something that looks almost like hope. Drake's voice rises again from the holding cells, but it's weaker now. Desperate, the threats have lost their power, become merely the impotent rage of a man watching his world crumble. Your father, Sheriff Wilson, says to Hannah, he's given these men something they haven't had in a long time. What's that? She asks. A chance to remember who they are. The sheriff replies, sometimes that's all it takes. Daniel stands, his movement drawing everyone's attention without effort. The program's tough, he tells Tank, tougher than anything Drake ever asked of you, but it's the right kind of tough, the kind that builds instead of breaks. Tank nods solemnly, like the service, exactly like that. Daniel agrees. You'll have structure, purpose, brotherhood, the real kind, not the counterfeit version you've been settling for. Marcus appears in the doorway, his face showing the weight of decisions made and paths chosen. Mr. Collins, the others, they want to know if you'd be willing to talk to them about how you managed after getting out. Daniel glances at Hannah, who smiles encouragingly. Go on, Dad, they need to hear it. The next hour passes in quiet conversation. Daniel sits with the former bikers, sharing experiences of transition, of finding purpose after service, of building a life that honors their training without being defined by violence. Hannah watches through the glass as hardened expressions soften, as defensive postures relax, as men who arrived as threats begin to look more like the soldiers they once were. Sheriff Wilson stands beside her, observing. Your father's doing more good here than any jail sentence. Could he? Showing them another way, Hannah says softly, like he always showed me. From the holding cells, Drake's voice has gone quiet. His threats have dissolved into silence, the sound of a man confronting the consequences of his choices. But in the main room, something else fills the air, the quiet murmur of men remembering who they were, discovering who they might become, and finding in the most unlikely place a path back to honor the transformation that began on a misty morning at Eagles Point Harbor continues, guided by a former SEAL who understands that the greatest victories often come not from defeating an enemy, but from helping them find their way home. Evening settles over Eagles Point Harbor as Daniel and Hannah finally leave the police station. The day's events have left them both exhausted, but there's a sense of accomplishment in the air. As they walk to their truck, Marcus calls out from behind them, "Mr. Collins, wait." He jogs over, still wearing his steel Viper's cut, but somehow looking different in it now. "There's something you need to know." Daniel turns, reading the concern in the former enforcer's face. "What is it, Drake?" He managed to make a call before they took his phone to his Lieutenant Razor back at the clubhouse. Marcus glances around nervously. "Razor's not like us, never served, never had honor to lose. He's just mean, and he's got about 15 guys who follow him blindly." Hannah feels her father tense.